just to let you know that there is a blue box up in the, if you have your cursor up to the upper left hand corner, there's a blue box in which you can click, and then you can join the group chat, which means if at any point you want to ask a question or make a comment as I'm talking or chatting, and or something's going wrong with the technology and you want to let me know, because I may be pontificating and saying something and I have no idea that all of a sudden I've gone mute. So if anything like that happens, feel free to type that in. If you have questions, ask questions. If you don't want me to, I understand if you don't want me to see you, if you're like, I don't want to be seen, you can actually mute yourself and still hear what I'm doing, and I'll go on faith that you're there. Occasionally, I would love to just have some sense that I'm not alone. But let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do for the next 6 weeks. A couple things clear, because there was some misunderstandings. This is an online class. It will take place 100% online. And other than our sessions on Monday and Wednesday evenings, starting at 5:30, everything else will be done on your own. Now, let me tell you a little bit who I am. My name is Mike Menard. I think I actually know, or at least know of, most of you. Some of you I've had in a class before. So I'm glad you're doing this. I have never taught an online class. And I'm guessing that many of you have never taken one. But I'm hoping that you'll have a lot of grace for me as I'm learning, just as I understand that it's new for many of you, and we'll all just have a lot of grace for each other. The challenge for me is that my typical way of teaching is through class discussion, and this is a challenge when I feel like right now I'm just talking to my laptop. So that feels a little weird. I'm just quickly, Paris is saying that the screen is black all of a sudden. Is that true of my screen? Have all of you gone suddenly? Oh, good, it's fixed. And there. So Mark is saying, sorry, working on the recording thing, think I messed it up. And well, that's awesome, Mark, keep working on that. And as long as everybody can. Anyway, my area of interest is certainly literature. I love literature. I fully understand that not everyone loves literature. I used to joke that I teach the classes people love to hate, because not everyone loves literature. And I understand that just because I don't like math. I don't understand why people would like math, but that gives me some love for people who don't like literature. The one thing I do hope, though, is that before this course is over, that we'll encounter something that captures your imagination. At least one thing. One of the most common questions I get is, why do we even have to take a literature class when I'm, say, a nursing major? My best answer to that is the best reason is because nursing isn't going to be your entire life. Your job is not going to be your entire life. And the older I get, and sadly I'm getting pretty old, this year I turned 50, the older I get, the more I find that it's things like the great stories, the great music, the great plays, the great novels, the great poems. These are the things I find myself turning to more and more as I get older, as I try to make sense of the world that doesn't always make sense to me, as I learn how to deal with loss in my life, as I learn how to deal with situations I couldn't have imagined, say, when I was in college. I find myself turning more and more into stories. And so that's why I think that this is valuable. Also, we're going to look at some of the foundational works of Western literature. What we mean by Western, not Western as in cowboys and Indians, but Western meaning the Western Hemisphere, which is a pretty large area, which means we're going to look at the Greeks, we're going to look at the Hebrews, we're going to look at the Romans, all of which are going to be central in creating the cultures of the Western Hemisphere. This is not in any way to argue that the Western literature is better than the Eastern. It's just that for most of the world's history, East and West have not been in contact with each other. And so those have become two distinct kinds of literatures. And so we're going to discuss this because in many ways, these are the works that invented us. Even if you've never read the Odyssey from Homer, chances are actually the Odyssey has read you. You very much are who you are because of the world that was created by Homer in his great epic poems, the Iliad, and its sequel, the Odyssey, that we're going to look at. Just as who you are was invented very much by the Bible. It created the culture you live in. It created the world you live in. It created the paradigms that we live in. And so whether or not you've actually read the Bible has read you. And I think that will also be true when we look at Oedipus Rex, the first really great theater piece. I think that will be true going all the way up to Shakespeare. That the world we live in was created by these works. And so I'm going to try something right now, and hopefully this will work. I'm going to actually go to my screen and make it so you can see my screen, and we'll see if this works. Let's see if we can see that. Nope, that did not work. Let me try that again. One more time. There we go. Let's see if you can see that. All right. Right now you should be seeing my screen, which is showing Google Classroom. Those of you who I can see, or maybe on the chat, if you can give me some sense that you do actually see that. If I could see you, give me a thumbs up. Good. Okay, so you see that on the screen. This is Google Classroom, of which most of you have already gone to. This is essentially where the class is going to largely take place. And you've been invited to it. Think of it, if you will, as a kind of academic Facebook. If you go up here, you'll see there are three links up here. There's one that says Stream, there's one that says Students, and one that says About. If I go to About, this is where, of course, you'll see this cute little picture of me, this little tiny picture of me. What you will also get is the course syllabus and weekly schedule. Okay, that is a PDF document that you can click on, and it'll give you the syllabus for this course. I'm going to click on that right now so that it will open up, and it should have opened up right there. This has the syllabus for the class. If you want, if it's easier, you can print it out so you have a hard copy of it. And it gives you the 5 texts that you're going to need. The first one that we're going to read, and we'll actually start discussing it next week, is The Odyssey by Homer. And I'm recommending the translation by Robert. You can find this at any public library for free. You can find it, if you're here at Union College, they're selling all of these books at the Union College store. You can actually go to YouTube and you can listen to Ian McKellen read this very translation of the Odyssey. So if you want to have Gandalf read the Odyssey to you and this translation, you can go there. I don't know that it's actually on YouTube legally, but it is actually there. Also going to look at Oedipus Rex. That's why there's a text that's called the Three Theban Plays. Oedipus is the second of 3 plays. They're called the Theban Plays. They're all about a man named Oedipus, who has the misfortune of being told from the time he's a baby that he's going to grow up, he's going to marry his mother and kill his father. So everybody in his life does everything they can to make sure he doesn't do that, which means he ends up killing his father and marrying his mother. Sounds like a good time. We're also going to look at Ovid's Metamorphoses, the great Roman poet Ovid, or Ovid, and where he essentially takes the Greek myths and he turns them into Roman myths. And very entertaining. We'll look at some of those as well. We're going to jump all the way up into the medieval time, medieval Europe, and we're going to look at a King Arthur story. Actually, my favorite King Arthur story, which is Sir Gawain, also pronounced Sir Gawain, and the Green Knight. Again, I'm recommending Simon Armitage, but Alex had asked me the question, does it matter? Oh, I see that Metamorphoses was not at the bookstore. I'll talk to them. If not, I will provide you with handouts with the stories I want you to read. Because I'm not asking you to read the whole book. I just want to look at select stories. And I may do that anyway, then that's one less thing you have to get. And last, we're going to look at Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, which you can find anywhere, including online. And there are several film versions of it, including some, I think, that are available on Netflix. The ones that are on Netflix are awful, but if you're willing to pay a couple dollars, you could see better versions on either Amazon or Vudu or something like that. You could read the syllabus on your own. You can see that I do have a phone number up there, but I prefer to be texted. I prefer texts. So if you have any questions, please take that phone number down and text me. I don't mind getting texts at all. And I'm going to go down here because you can see all of these. We will have 3 papers in the class. So essentially the class will consist of twice a week, we're going to hang out right here. We'll have regular discussions that will be online at Google Classroom. And you'll have 3 papers, 2 very short, mostly reaction type papers. There, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Somehow I got cut off. If that happens again, I'll just get back. Okay, good. Also in the same document, you'll see a 1-page course schedule. It has all 6 weeks put onto this grid. And it's not a form that I'm used to, but it's a form that we have to use because this class gets audited by various entities. And so this is the form that they like. So you'll see exactly where we're going and all the works that we're going to study. And the I hope am I still there? Okay, good, I think I am. And anyway, so you can print that out or see this at any point where you see what we're going to read. We're not going to be reading the entire books of some of these. Some of these we're just going to actually read a couple chapters. So you can take a look at that. Going back to the, oops, not that yet. I'm going back to that. Back to the sheet here. I realize you have not been able to see what I've been talking about. There we go. So going back to, or back to the shared screen. So sorry about that. I'm just going to real quick show you. Here is the course schedule. So you can go to that. You can print it out if you want. This is everything we're going to do for the next 6 weeks. And I'm going to try to follow that very strictly so that every week is incredibly predictable. That's my primary goal, is to be as predictable as possible. And again, now going to the stream part of the Google Classroom, I'm going to be asking you some questions. Some of you, 8 of you, already answered my first question, which was getting to know you. Are you a fan of literature, of reading? And tell me about yourself. Which I enjoyed reading. What I learned is that some of you love to read and some of you don't love to read. And some of you are kind of in between. I'll try to be as interesting as possible. I do have a question that will relate to what we're talking about this week, which is about Read the Monomyth handout. And all the handouts are on Google Classroom. So there's nothing that I have that isn't on there already as far as handouts. But also it relates to what I'm going to talk about here shortly. And I would love to hear any responses that you may have. For some reason, my intent was that you would be able to see each other's comments, but apparently that is not happening. I'm going to try a test here to see if I'm doing this right. So I've asked a test question, which is, what is your favorite color? And no due date or anything. I've made it so that you can reply to each other and you can edit your own answer. Here we go. I'm going to ask it. And so if you get a chance, feel free if you want to try that and I can see if it's working. You don't have to do this very second. But what I want to know is, can you see everybody else's responses? But you should be able to add a comment, see other people's comments, and even respond to their comments. My goal is that this will be a discussion between you and me, but also you and other students. Feel free to disagree with each other as long as we're nice to each other. If I feel that something is unkind or anything like that, which I highly doubt is going to happen, I'll just mute that or delete that particular post. But feel free to disagree with each other. I'm really hoping actually that will happen, because more likely what I fear is people will be too nice to each other and be afraid to express their own opinions. Your opinion is absolutely valid. So I hope that all makes sense. That's where we're going to have a lot of things. I would recommend going to Google Classroom daily just to see if there's anything that is of interest in that day. You don't get marked right or wrong. There's no wrong answers, but you just get points for participating regularly. And if you can't make it every day, that's fine. But if you can make it a couple times a week to go in and answer some questions, and just show me that you have been doing the reading, show me that you have a working knowledge of what's going on. Anyway, so right now, I'm looking to see if anyone, you just have to click a link to read others' comments. Oh, okay, gotcha. Good, thank you, Kevin, who's just said that you can read other people's if you like. And so please help yourself in doing that. And thank you, Megan, who just joined back again. So if you have any further questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and just start flapping my big mouth and talking a little bit. And I hope that this will be interesting to you. And if it's not, then maybe what I could do is start saying it softly. It could be like an ASMR, and it could put you to sleep. So I'm going to jump over here to and see if this will work. Here I have a I have a PowerPoint, and it should be able to work here, that you can see why do we read. Let's see if this works. And it looks like it's working. And because I want to address this, I feel responsible for addressing this particular issue. Why do we read? Why do we do this? Because reading is a dying art, it seems. Once upon a time, every educated person would have been familiar with Homer, would have been familiar with Sophocles, or would have read, of course, the dialogues of Plato and Aristotle, would have certainly been aware of the plays of Shakespeare. Sadly, today you can graduate with a college degree and not know this, not have read any of those authors. I find that tragic. Once upon a time, people could sit down and watch television and recognize that these are the same stories that were already told to us in literature. But one of the things, let's see if I can get this to work. I hope you see a whole bunch of French fries on the screen. And because my goal there is to make you hungry. And when my son was little, my son's 18 now, but when he was a little kid, my son was convinced that the greatest food on the planet was French fries, McDonald's French fries. If someone were to tell him, or that there would be no McDonald's French fries in heaven, he probably would have cried and begged to go to the other place, because he just was sure that McDonald's French fries was the best thing in the world. And there's no way I could have explained to him when he was 3 or 4 years old that the day is coming when he's going to experience other foods that are more complex, more interesting, and more wonderful than even McDonald's French fries. I'll give you kind of an idea, because have you ever noticed that all of the truly finer pleasures in life, the things that we love deeply, not the surface things like McDonald's French fries, but the things that we truly love deeply, that all of these finer pleasures are acquired pleasures, things we maybe even had to learn to love before we came to the point where we love them deeply. And that certainly was true in food. I love sushi. I don't know how many of you love sushi. Sushi is my favorite food on the planet. But there's no way that a 3-year-old often will like sushi. It's a very complicated food. It's a beautiful food. And for some people, it's an acquired taste. And once you acquire it, it's a higher pleasure that far surpasses McDonald's French fries. Coffee. I don't know how many of you are coffee drinkers, but coffee is certainly an acquired taste. Maybe not an acquired smell, but an acquired taste. And once you learn to love it, though, you'll discover that it's really a higher pleasure, where a good cup of coffee is a finer pleasure and a more marvelous experience than, say, a cup of Kool-Aid, which is an easy pleasure. And I don't know if that looks good to you. It looks wonderful to me. But the truth is that all finer pleasures are acquired. I don't know how many of you are snowboarders or skiers or guitar players, piano players. The first time I went skiing, it was the most miserable experience of my life. I'm going downhill. I'm getting a nice enema. And it's absolutely miserable. And it took a long time before it actually got to the place where I gained enough skill that I could go down the hill and actually like it. I'm a musician. I play guitar. That's what I truly love. When I first started playing, it was miserable. I hated it. It hurt my fingers. It hurt my wrist. Now I would rather play guitar than just about anything, but I had to learn it. And that's true of every finer pleasure. We have a name for that. We call it the sublime. And the sublime is, in slang a lot, to mean things such as, like maybe a guy comes home from a date and his roommate says, "Hey, how was the date?" And he might say, "Oh, it was sublime." Well, we know that he means that it was just really good. But that's not exactly what the sublime means. As a matter of fact, if you look at the dictionary definition, the first definition is a difficult pleasure, often an acquired taste. I doubt that's what he meant about the date, that it was a difficult pleasure. But rather maybe something more like the second definition, which is a moment of climactic pleasure at experiencing utter humanness or divinity. I don't know if you've ever experienced that moment where you're just like, wow, this is amazing. And that the idea of the climactic pleasure is the right definition, where it has a kind of sexual connotation. It's a brief, fleeting, but unbelievably awesome moment. And those who experience it are often trying very hard to get it back. And that's really what literature is all about. So the reason why we're studying the works that we are studying is that these are works that over the past thousands of years, human beings in the Western world have managed to experience this kind of pleasure, this difficult, acquired pleasure that required effort on their part, that turned into something that was just unbelievably awesome, often life-changing. The Greeks are wonderful in that they have gods for everything. They have literally a god that is responsible for about every single aspect of life. And there's a lot of debate as to whether the Greeks actually literally believed in all of those gods. Certainly the temples would give you an idea that they certainly believed in the major gods. But whether or not they believed in all the minor gods is up for debate. But they had this idea that Zeus, the great god, the main god, the head god of the Olympian gods, gave birth to, in the first stories, there was 3 daughters, and then eventually turned into 7 daughters, and then the later stories, it was 9 daughters, who inspired this kind of amazing experience. And each of the muses, of course, was responsible for a different kind of sublime creative moment, sublime ecstasy. And the queen of these goddesses who inspire creativity is the muse named Calliope, because she inspired epic poetry. But you have a muse who inspires history, a muse that inspires architecture, a muse that actually inspires history and philosophy. And I like this idea that of taking the idea of creativity and anthropomorphizing it, giving it actually kind of like a divine creation, as if these divine beings have touched me at this moment. We, on the other hand, are a technological culture. So when we're trying to give this idea of what being touched by an awesome idea, a creative explosion, if you will, we would use a technological way. So we might sometimes depict it with, like in cartoons, where you have the guy who's got the aha moment, and on top of his head, there's a light bulb going on. What does that mean? Well, that's because being a technological society rather than one that's more of a spiritual society, we tend to take this idea and apply a technological way of explaining it. Kind of the light comes on rather than a god touching me. I don't know if you have ever experienced a glimmer of the sublime, but that's our goal here, is to find something where you have this moment where you just feel like maybe you touched the hand of God, you touched the hand of something divine, you touched the hand of something larger than yourself. something more that's ancient, something that is deeper than the very, very, very shallow cesspool of, say, social media or television or film, or much of what is available to us. So I'm just hoping that in something that we experience here, that you will have that moment like that. That's going to be kind of our goal. And and I'm going to tell you right now that, oh, no sound. All of a sudden, I need to get my sound back. Sorry. Do you have my sound now? Okay. Good. Now, in the Google Classroom, I have given you a link to a piece that I find wonderful, really. It is a video op-ed. I don't know if you, yeah, video op-ed by a man by the name of Dana Gioia. It actually is Gioia. Yeah. Dana Gioia is a poet. As a matter of fact, one of the leading living poets. He also is used to be the head of the National Endowment for the Arts. I believe now he teaches at UCLA. But he has a wonderful piece that I think I would like you to watch. Short, I think it's only 5 or 6 minutes, if that, about why we read. And he's going to argue a step further. I'm arguing that the reason why we read is this divine kind of pleasure that we may experience that we're desperately hoping for. And he argues that it does actually make you a better person, that it actually makes you more aware of the inner lives of those around you, that it makes you feel like you're not alone. And people who read are actually more likely to be involved in good works, good activities. They tend to be more generous people. So being a reader does in fact make you a better person. I'm not suggesting that English majors are the best people on campus, because they're not. Because I know a lot of English majors. But there is something about reading that gives us pleasure and adds other things to our lives. I'm going to go ahead and go right into the primary lecture of tonight, and that is I want to talk about something that's called the monomyth. And I'm going to load it up onto your screen, and I'm hoping you don't mind, because I'd rather you watch my PowerPoint than watch me, because I have a face for radio. So hopefully, see, Megan has asked, when we respond to the video, do we attach a file or just comment? No, just comment. That would be just fine. You know, if you just want to even say, found this interesting, I agree, here's why, or I liked it, here's why. But that one, I'm not actually looking for a response. I just would love you to watch it. For the others, though, I am looking for perhaps kind of more of a response. I just would like you to watch that one. I think you'll like it. I think you'll find him kind of interesting. So I'm just going to jump right into this. And if at any point you have any additional, yes, I will put the slides all online. Thank you. I will put these slides online. So you don't have to actually take notes from things that are on the slides. If you want to just access that. They're not up there now, but I'll get those up either tonight or first thing in the morning. The monomyth. I'm going to talk a lot in the next 6 weeks about that word myth or mythology. And I want you to understand what I mean when I say the word myth. All right, when you usually hear the word myth in our culture today, that often means like a fib. Like if someone says that's a myth, what we mean is that's a lie. That is not what I mean here. And that is not actually what a myth is. Myth literally is from the Greek mythos, which means story. And myths are more, though, than just a story. It's more than just a once upon a time. Myths are stories that are so significant to our culture that you can't actually tell where the culture begins and the story ends, or where the story ends and the culture begins. The two are so intertwined with each other. I'm going to put myself on here for a moment so you can just see me. They're so intertwined with each other that you can't separate them. These stories, in many ways, create the culture. And that doesn't mean that the story is untrue. Every culture has its stories, its myths that create it, and of course the culture then creates the myth. Some of which are true and some of which are not. Every nation has their myths. And the way you tell whether or not a myth is a living myth or a dead myth is whether or not there is attached to the myth ritual. I want you to remember this. All ritual is a reenactment of a myth. Ritual is different than tradition. Ritual is different than a habit. A ritual is a reenactment of a myth. I'll give you a good hint. Like if I had to pick the central myth of Christianity, it would be the death and resurrection of Jesus. Now, I personally believe with all my heart that the death and resurrection of Jesus really literally happened. That Jesus literally died, and that he literally rose again, and he literally is alive today. But it is also the central myth of Christianity. Now, by that, again, doesn't mean it's not true. What it means is that you can't separate Christianity from the story of the death and resurrection of Christ, and you can't separate the death and resurrection of Christ from Christianity. They are so intertwined that they are inseparable. And we know it's a living myth because we have attached to it ritual. We reenact the myth. Every time we take communion or the Eucharist, we are reenacting the death and resurrection of Christ. When we take the bread, it's the broken body of Christ. When we drink the wine, it's the blood of Christ, and we are reenacting the death of Christ. Now, Jesus actually was taking the central myth of Judaism and transforming it, because the central myth of Judaism is the Passover, where the angel comes and passes over, and they thus live and then are brought into the promised land. And so for someone who is Jewish, the bread and the cup represents this night when in Egypt the angel of death passed them over. And so when they take the bread and they take the wine, which they do, they're reenacting that story, which again, I believe is a true story. It's a living myth. Now, the stories of Zeus and Apollo and Athena from the Greeks are wonderful stories, and we'll definitely talk about those. But I would not argue that they are living myths, because we no longer have any significant active rituals reenacting their stories. And there may be some weird cult out somewhere doing so, but not in any significant way. We have national myths. If I had to argue, for example, one of our the central mythology of the United States, it would be the Civil War, more than the Revolutionary War. Because the Civil War is the war, of course, it was the war between the northern states and the southern states, arguing over everything from slavery to states' rights to really a national identity. And we know this is a central moment in American history, because before the Civil War, the United States and citizens of it referred to it in the plural. The United States are going to do this. The United States are about to blank. Because they saw the states as individual, unique entities. And oh, absolutely, it's okay to record what I'm saying if it helps you. Um, and but after the Civil War, it became the United States is going to do this. At that point, you really became a nation. Are there reenactments of that myth? Absolutely, all the time. If you've ever been a part of a Civil War reenactment. On the 4th of July in the United States, when the sun goes down, we have fireworks. That is a ritual. It's a reenacting of a myth. It's reenacting, actually, the War of 1812. And a lot of people don't realize it, that they're celebrating and reenacting a myth, but that's what we're doing. We're reenacting the War of Independence, of which the War of 1812 is kind of like part 2 of the War of Independence. And that means it's a living myth. Families have their own myths too. Like, for example, you probably have stories that are so central to your family and your family story that they've created what your family is, and your family has created your story. I'll give you one in mind. Some time ago, long time ago, on Thanksgiving dinner, my mom set a Thanksgiving spread out for us all. And she decided it would be nice to put these little tea candles in front of each of the plates, and she lit them. But she also had used a paper tablecloth. Now, my younger sister thought it would be funny to tear off pieces of the paper tablecloth and to light it on fire, and then as it would catch on fire, she'd blow it out. Unfortunately, she lit the tablecloth, it lit on fire, and poof, next thing you know, there's a big fire. She didn't have any water in her cup, so she wasn't able to put it out, and it almost turned into a massive disaster. To this day, my mom will often put out a spread for a special holiday, and she'll still put those little tea candles out and light each one, except for the one in front of my sister, as a just kind of a funny remembrance of that moment. And that brings our family together. We laugh about it, and that becomes a mythology to us. So that's what I mean when I say myth. Now, one of the things that I want to address, though, is this question. Have you ever had this sense that you can see that at this moment, but I don't think you can. So let me try that again. Sorry. Here we go. Let's see if this works. No? Oh yeah, it was working. Never mind, it was working. So here we go, one more time. All right, there we go. Have you ever had this sense that every movie you go to or every book you read, after a while, it's the exact same story told over and over again? And the sets may change, the names may change, but oh my gosh, is there no creativity left in the world? Well, the truth of the matter is that many people have noticed for hundreds and hundreds of years that it seems like every story that we love, especially the great myth stories, are all the exact same story. So I want you to try something kind of fun for me, and that is, I want you to think for a moment of your favorite stories in the world. Like, do you have a movie that you love? Maybe it's a movie that you've, I don't know, that you've seen 50 times, and you'll probably see 50 times again. It's not necessarily a movie that is the greatest movie, but you just love it. Maybe if you have one right now, you can like put it in the chat, like list some names of movies you'd love. Fight Club is one. The Big Lebowski, somebody said. Anyone else? What do you got? Anyone else got one? Oh, Rush Hour. What else is out there? I love Interstellar. That was a great film. Maze Runner. And these are interesting. You're in a fun class because normally I get, I'll get like Oh yay, Finding Dory. I love all Pixar. Pixar, of course, is a great example of what I'm going to be talking about. I love Lord of the Rings. I love the books and the movies. Anyone like that? I'm a Tolkien fanatic. Um, I love uh, so many great stories. Um, the Hunger Games, wonderful. Inception. All of these are great examples, actually, of what I'm going to be talking about. And what's interesting to me is almost all of those are also books. Not Finding Dory. And I'm not sure about The Big Lebowski. I don't think it is either. But the others are books, and or at least the ideas have come from books. Um, the And I'm kind of curious, do any of you have a favorite Bible story? Like you just keep going back to this same Bible story. Maybe if you have one, put it up there. Job. I don't see that every day. Wow, 2 Jobs. Ruth and Boaz. Oh, Cain and Abel. Esther. Often I'll see a bunch of Josephs. Any Joseph lovers out there? Moses, Samson, and Delilah. We'll talk a little bit about that. Or David. I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you notice anything, but all the movies that you love, and even some of the Bible stories that you love, I'm wondering if you notice anything that they have in common. It is very common, like maybe you love romances, maybe you love mysteries or adventures, maybe you love those stories where good triumphs over evil, or maybe some of those ones where misunderstood characters are proven worthy. I love stories where they kiss at the end. I'm super excited when they kiss at the end, as long as they don't kill the dog. I'm generally pretty happy. I think that Old Yeller was made by the devil. I hate Old Yeller. Or what's that other one? Where the Red Fern Grows. Evil. So it's funny how I don't seem to mind so much when the people die, but don't you dare kill the dog off. But there does seem to be a kind of connection between, not only if we actually look at your stories, but there does seem to be a kind of similarity. And now the big question is why? This is an idea that scholars have been wondering for a long time. As a matter to the point where scholars have noticed that we really only have one story that we love. And it is the exact same story. It doesn't matter whether it's Star Wars or Cinderella. It doesn't matter whether it's The Princess and the Pea or Harry Potter. It doesn't matter whether it's the story of Joseph or whether it's the story of Beauty and the Beast. They are actually all the exact same story in some ways. And we could actually map the similarities. It's almost creepy how similar the stories are. We begin to realize that we really only like one story. There are other kinds of stories, we just don't like those stories. To the point where we can actually map those stories out. I'm going to do something really embarrassing. I'm going to tell you my favorite movies. I'm hoping, well, you can laugh. I love the movie Amadeus. It's my favorite movie. Anyone seen that? Yay! Mark likes it. Kevin, no. F to you. And no, I'm kidding. Kidding. It's a great movie about Mozart. Well, it's actually a murder mystery. It's really good. I love the movie Finding Neverland. I think this is a wonderful film. I don't know why it just captures my imagination. Although she does die, but at least the dog doesn't die. I love the old movie Ben-Hur. The new one was so-so, but I love the old one with Charlton Heston. All right, I'll admit I love The Sound of Music a lot. The Julie Andrews one, not the Carrie Underwood one, and then I love. Okay, I'm gonna lose my man card here. I love Pride and Prejudice. I love the book, and I love the long 5-hour BBC version. Yes, and I do love Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I actually thought that was hilarious. I love all things Jane Austen, but don't hold that against me. And my favorite Bible stories, I don't know why. I don't know what this says about me. Maybe it says I need some therapy. I always loved Gideon as a story. I love that story where you have like down to 300 people and they go and they fight a massive group of like 120,000 and beat them all. I think it's because like Sabbath afternoons were boring as a kid for me. So my two sisters and I would play Bible stories, and I'd play Gideon. My sisters would be the Midianites, and they would, and I would like blow the horn, and then they would die. And same thing with Jericho. I'd march around them 7 times, and then they would die. What a terrible brother I am. I don't know. I've always been fascinated with the burning bush, Moses in general. Anyway, so there is this sense that there's one story, and they're all the exact same story. The first person who really managed to, in a scholarly way, to identify this was Carl Jung. Carl Jung noticed that all of our myths are the same story, whether it's Zeus, whether it's Odin and Thor, whether it's even the Native American myths or the African myths. They're all the exact same story, just told over and over and over again. Going all the way up to contemporary time, whether it's The Lion King or, like I said, Harry Potter. They're all the exact same story. Now, Carl Jung was interested in that because he realized that this was a way to help people heal. Because if we love one story, it must be because it's the story we live. And therefore, he could use that in therapy to help people see where they are in this epic story that they're in, and to see that they could get better and by understanding that. Now, Carl Jung's most famous protege was a man by the name of Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell, actually in the 1940s, wrote a book called A Hero with 1,000 Names, where he set out to actually outline the exact map of this one story, and did so quite effectively. Which you have a handout that you could print out if you want in the Monomyth materials that actually has the exact plot, if you will, of every mythic story that there is. But the most common question that Joseph Campbell was asked is, since he was asking that all myths are the same story, the most common question he got is, why? Here's his very unsatisfying answer. He says, we find ourselves in every culture, in every era, from Gilgamesh, which is the oldest known piece of literature from about 2000 BC, to Star Wars, telling the same story over and over again. The question I am asked most often is, why? Why do we tell one story? My simple but unsatisfying answer is just because. That is such a cop-out answer. I hate that. So I prefer the way that C.S. Lewis argued it. Here is a very rough version of that story. It's actually going counterclockwise, where you have a hero who has a call to adventure. Something's going to happen that's going to disrupt the hero's life and start an adventure. Something's going to disrupt his life, whether it's Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars, where suddenly he runs into some droids, and there's Princess Leia saying, Obi-Wan, I need your help. Or whether it's Frodo, who suddenly has Gandalf at his door saying, you need to run, these Black Riders are coming after you. Inevitably, after the call to adventure, the hero has a helper, often a supernatural helper, whether it's an Obi-Wan Kenobi, whether it is a fairy godmother, whether it is Gandalf, whether it's in every chick flick, it's the girlfriend. So it starts at the top and it goes counterclockwise. And then there will be a series of battles, and there's a much more detailed version of it in the handout. It will ultimately end up in this place called that Campbell called the belly of the whale. It's this point of absolute despair. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many of you like the film or the book, The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride, the author of The Princess Bride, loved the monomyth idea, Joseph Campbell's idea, so much that essentially wrote paint by number, just essentially wrote the story using this fill in the blanks. Same thing with George Lucas when he wrote Star Wars. He had this, he had Joseph Campbell's map beside him, and he just wrote a story paint by number. Now, if that sounds like cheating, it's not, because there's only one story, so you may as well tell that one story, and then the creativity is in what you do with it. But there's this point of the belly of the whale, or the pit of despair, this point where the hero seems to have achieved absolute despair and is not going to get there. The author of The Princess Bride goes so far as to call this pit of despair moment the pit of despair. Eventually it gets out with the help of helpers. Eventually we'll have to face the final test alone. If the hero is going to die, it will often be in the trip back home, where the hero is returned to the original place, a changed person, usually with a boon of some sort, some way of being able to save the community or to bring a gift to the community. C.S. Lewis very much believed in this, as did Tolkien. This idea of the monomyth or the hero's journey. C.S. Lewis and Tolkien called it the great story. And C.S. Lewis argued this in his book, The Weight of Glory: the value of the myths, again, not fibs, but the great stories that we tell, we most enjoy, is they reveal all things we know about ourselves and restore those things which have been hidden by a veil of the familiar. And Lewis argued not only is the plot essentially the same, but the point of the story is always the same. And I agree with him. And that is that you are more than you think you are. And if you think about that, isn't that the point of every great story that we love? Every chick flick, every good versus evil story, it's the same thing. Discovering, where the hero discovers that there is more to them than they realized, or more to them than others realized. I saw Guardians of the Galaxy this weekend. That's the point of that one, where the main hero discovers that, wow, there really is more to him than even he realized. It turns out he's well, I don't want to give anything away. If you think about a contemporary myth, kind of an American myth, the film The Lion King. And it's got all the same plot twists, where you've got a hero who has a call to adventure, picks up a series of helpers, in his case, a pig and a meerkat, and it reaches a kind of pit of despair, and has to face the final test alone. But he has this weird kind of mystical moment where he's looking up into the sky, has a dreamlike moment where he sees his father Mufasa. And I don't know if any of you remember what Mufasa says, but he looks down and he says, "You are more than you have become." Of course, he says it better than that with it. James Earl Jones's voice. You are more than you have become. And that's the point. That's what C.S. Lewis is saying. That's the point of every myth. The hero discovers that you are more. There's more to you than you know. And we love that. The reason why this story resonates is not only does our life follow this plot, but this is the point of our lives, where we're discovering that there's more to us than we realize, that there is more to it than others realize. That there is more to other people than they realize. Czesław Miłosz, the great Polish poet, one of my all-time favorites, he said, "We tell one story and only one, because there is a sense that we are more than we are." And Robert Graves, another great poet, a British poet, kind of an odd poet, he wrote in his strange work called The White Goddess, "There are a million stories, but one myth. And that one myth says that we are more than the dim creatures we seem to be. This is the essence of religion as well as all literature. Every hero's story is our own. The reason why great heroic mythic stories resonate and maybe even have that sublime moment is because that's our story. We're in the middle of an epic story of our life, discovering that we are more than we realize, that we're more remarkable than we realize, that we are really something astonishing. So why is every story, and I'll get to that, by the way, Brandon. Brandon's asking, when are the exams? I will get to that. So why is every story essentially the same story? I think it's because it's our story. And I think that that's true of true stories, the great true mythic stories, even stories of Samson and Gideon and Joshua and Dinah and Ruth. That's the story we're in. I love John Eldridge, great Christian writer. He argues, much kind of echoing C.S. Lewis, that we keep telling the same story because that's the story we're in. I'm gonna come back to myself here. Hopefully you can all see me. So that's kind of what we're after here. We're after trying to find a way that we can kind of learn how to find out who we are. That's why we read. That's the thing that entices us to read. So I can get out of this and get back to here. Yeah. Anyway, and I'm hoping that in something that we read, that it will have that effect on you. The first significant work that I'm asking you to read, we're not going to get to until next Monday, but I would like you to start reading it now, and that is the Odyssey. I'm not asking you to read the entire thing. Mostly I'm asking you to read the opening books and then books 9 through 12. There are 24 books in all in the work, but I'm only asking you to read about a quarter of that. It's going to tell the story about a man named Odysseus who is trying to get back home after a 10-year war for Troy. He's the one who helped the Greeks defeat the Trojans by coming up with the idea of the so-called Trojan horse. Everybody gets to go home of the Greeks except for Odysseus. He's going to spend 10 years trying to get back home to his wife and son. And that's what the Odyssey is him trying to get back home. And there's a reason he can't get back home. He's ticked off one of the gods. And so he's just going to have adventure after adventure trying to get back home. And I love this story. I think this is our life. We're just trying to get back home. Yes, that is the one that Ian McKellen reads. So you can hear him read it. Read it to you if you like. Or if you want to do something faster, you can just pick up the book. Some have asked, does it matter what translation you use? No, you can use any translation you want. I just recommend the ones that I've given you and have them available at the bookstore because I think they're the easiest. But there are lots available. There are probably 20 Odyssey translations. Pick one that is handy for you or one that looks interesting to you and run with it. Ian McKellen will read the translation that I'm going to be reading from. And but for Wednesday, okay, so that's what I want you to have read by next Monday. So you have a week to read the Odyssey. So, and I know that's sounds like a long time, but I would get reading. It's not easy reading. I'm just going to tell you now, it's not going to be as easy to read as People Magazine or anything like that, and it doesn't have any pictures. But I encourage you, work hard to slog your way through it because it will reward. And yes, and I see, Brandon, yeah, I'm aware that the Metamorphosis is not in the bookstore. I may give that as a handout, so let's not worry about that one. And I'll get that to you. I will have some questions probably on the weekend about the Odyssey just to encourage you to read. But for Wednesday, I want you to put all your energy into reading the Odyssey. That's what I want you to spend much of your energy on. But I would very much like for you to, for Wednesday, if you wouldn't mind, to read the first 4 chapters of Genesis. Now, I'm assuming that many of you have already read Genesis before, so you're thinking, I've already done that. If you want to experience it in a different way, a completely different way, in Google Classroom, there are handouts, and one of them is Genesis. Yes, Faith, that's all you have to read, is those books. So books 1, 4, and 9 through 12, and that is all. And I'll tell you right now, we're going to spend most of our time, I'll give you a little hint, that we're going to spend most of our time in books 9 through 12, although I think reading 1 through 4 may help you understand what's going on a little bit, but 9 through 12 is where we're going to spend most of our energies. So if you read nothing else, make sure you read books 9 through 12. Okay, I hope that's helpful. There is, and I'm going to again go to Google Classroom here if I can, and I can find it. There it is. So here we go. I'm going to put it on the screen so you can see what I'm seeing. And so share. So if you go up to About, click on About. Toward the bottom here, there are class handouts and readings. One of the handouts says handout from the origin. It's the third one down. That is, and if you click on it, that is a translation of the book of Genesis that I did when I was in grad school. I kind of combined my 2 areas of interest, which is the Bible and literature, and I translated the book of Genesis. It took me 5 years, a lot of tears, and I did this for my graduate work. I guarantee you it will not read like a typical Genesis because it's a very literal translation. The names are written as they would be kind of spoken in Hebrew. And we'll talk a little bit on Wednesday about Genesis. And I'll be referring to this particular document. So you may even find it useful to print it out to make it easier to read. But I think you'll find it interesting. So if you want to read Genesis in a way that will be completely new and interesting, I guarantee you this will not read like the KJV or NIV. So that is available there. I'm encouraging you in the next couple of days, if you haven't had a chance to answer this question about literature, and also to any comments you may have about the monomyth and the origin, the Genesis that I'm asking you to read. I'm also, of course, asking you to look at this video by Dana Joya here. I will have a question relating to what I've been talking about today that I'll put up probably first thing in the morning, and that's kind of how the class will run. And I'll just chat, and we will get a chance to kind of get to know each other online through Google Classroom. And I'm hoping that you'll find it engaging. And are there any questions that I can answer? Either I might be able to hear you, but it might be easier if you just did it in the group chat that I can answer at this very moment while I'm here paying attention. Okay, when are the exams? So the exams are, they are take-home exams, and there's not a Moodle page in this class. Let me answer that first question first, the exam. So they're take-home exams. They're not up yet because they didn't want you to start looking at them yet. And you'll just work on them on your own and upload them. They're not like your typical exam. They're not like multiple choice or anything. They'll just have a few kind of thought questions largely with some matching. I think you'll find them quite doable. And of course, with all the exams, You can use your notes, you can use any materials that you have, you can use the internet, you can even use each other. It's not encourage cheating, it's actually just encourage dialogue. There's not a Moodle page for this class, which means that what I will have to do for your grades is I'll just have to do it via email to let you know how you're doing. Although much of the grade will be built on your papers and your participation on Google Classroom, and those grades will actually appear in Google Classroom. So Google Classroom is actually going to replace Moodle for this class. There are no quizzes. Instead of quizzes, you'll have thought questions pretty regularly, almost daily, that you'll have several days to answer, so you don't have to feel like you have to come every day in Google Classroom, and those will be the equivalent of quizzes. So one of the things I ask you in your responses on Google Classroom is show me that you have some working knowledge of what we're reading. And then the final exam, the midterm and the final exam, which is the only exams that we have, will give me definitely an idea whether you're actually doing the reading or not, or whether you're paying attention to these lectures or not. I will have some things that will only be available if you saw the lectures. Mark has asked, can I think of a story that does not fit the diagram that we looked at before? I could think of a number of stories that do not, but they're not super popular. Because here's the thing, there are other kinds of stories. For example, very stream of consciousness kinds of stories that don't exactly have a story arc, don't exactly have a climax, where you just basically have things happening, but there's not really an overarching climax or move. Like, so you don't have a sense like the story has a conflict, builds towards a climax, and then comes down to a resolution. But those stories tend to not be very popular. They tend to have maybe a very, very small artsy following, and they tend not to last. Whereas something that has this kind of a story tends to have a lasting power. That's why we're still reading the Chronicles of Narnia or the Wizard of Oz, why we're still reading Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno, any of the stories of Shakespeare, why we will probably continue to read Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, why all of these stories will continue to last, whereas something more stream of consciousness tends to go away as a fad. I mean, I can give you a good example. Like, I can tell a story like, once upon a time there was a barn, and the barn had a hole in it, and an ant walked into the hole, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. I can do that all day. It's got action, it's got a plot, it's got characters, things are happening, and yet it feels like Chinese water torture after a little bit. We want that sort of arch. And I've had people say, well, what about this story? What about that story? And almost always you can find that the basic stories are. No, it doesn't mean every step will be there exactly, but the general steps are there. The overall thing will be there. And many of the great storytellers are so familiar, are so aware that this is the only story we like, that they just use that as a kind of paint by number. If any of you were to take an MFA class on writing, on how to write short story or novels, they essentially teach you this as a formula. Because if you don't follow this formula, people will hate your story, period. And so that's how strong that we love the story. Any other questions? The A is a 97. No, I will say, here's what, if there's ever been a criticism that I have, is that it is never that I'm a hard teacher. Which I've tried, so I've given up. I'm not a hard teacher. And so I tend to give good grades. So I don't think you'll have a difficult time achieving that at all. Plus, at the end, the highest score is 100%. And sometimes they even tend to make it the second or third, so I'll end up with a couple students with 105% in the class. I hope in saying that you don't get the idea that I'm a pushover, because I hope I'm not that. And I hope you don't get the idea that it's a fluff class, because I don't believe that either. But my goal is to sell you on. I want you to love it. Not love it like I love it, but to see its value. I don't think you'll find that hard to achieve at all. I don't think I've ever once in 15 years had someone in the end say that my levels of grades were too hard. So I hope that answers that. So don't let that panic you in any way. Any other questions? And by the way, feel free, once you have had a chance to actually go through the syllabus, once you've had a chance to go through the schedule, that you can either text me or email me questions. My email is in there. It's mike.menard, MENNARD, at UCollege. Brandon's asked if I have an office. I don't actually have an office, but for this week, I will be in the humanities division in the mornings. And I'm actually there most mornings anyway, because I also write for the college, and I'm doing my writing there. So from about 9 in the morning till almost noon, I will be in the humanities office, which is our department, which is on the 4th floor of the Dick Building. And I would love it, Mark, if you would find a way to upload it on YouTube. I would love that. So yes, I would love that. So let's work on that and get that to happen so everyone can have access to that. So thank you, Mark. You are a stud and a gentleman. So like, for example, tomorrow or Wednesday or Friday or Thursday, if you want to see me, come by the humanities division. I'm there in the office. Mine has a sign now on it that says Mike Menard. I'm off to the corner. And otherwise just scream really loud when you're in there. I'll probably hear you. Stacy wants to know if we finish a paper before it's due, can we email it to you for a rough draft to look through for feedback? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I would be giddy about that. I would be happy if you want to even look. I've already got your first paper, which is not due for almost 2 weeks. And if you wanted to start on it right now, you absolutely could. I'd be happy to look at it. You can even email it to me, or you can upload it to me. Either way, it's great. I'm trying to remember if my email is on here, but if it's not, I will make sure that it does get up here. But yeah, I would totally do that. I could give you some ideas of what I think. Most people who do that generally end up with what they call a good grade. And it's not required that you do that. And anyway, or if you have any questions, or if you would like to go a different direction in the paper than I'm asking, I'm open to that too. The thing about literature is it's a creative kind of area, and I would love you to feel like you could be creative sometimes in what you do. I'm going to give you a creative option instead of a research paper. Some of you may hate research papers more than death itself. And I actually have a creative option. So if you don't want to write a research paper, I have a way that you can do a creative project instead. I'll get to that. Actually, I'll probably discuss that on Wednesday. Any other last questions before we call it a night? Not ever having done this before, I hope that was tolerable. Class does end at 7:30, but that doesn't mean that but here's the beautiful thing about being the teacher is when I feel like my material is done, I think I'm just going to go ahead and end. since this is the first night, I just want you to get familiar with what's there in Google Classroom. And so class will actually begin, we'll meet again on Wednesday at 5:30, not 5:15. I did 5:15 because we were, they said that to do that for kind of troubleshooting. Looks like we had no trouble. And so we'll start class right at 5:30. I'll try to begin as quickly as possible. If you want to come on a little early, that would be great. And anyway,